This is VikesNow, and we're trying to stay optimistic at 0-3. The two gentlemen on this show did not expect the team to start 0-3. And in fact, we were just talking to each other, a grand speech among friends, that if they just would have won the Buccaneers game, the last two losses would have been explainable, quasi-forgivable, with sights set on the Panthers. But that's revisionist history. This football team's 0-3. And we're going to do like a mini through week 3 autopsy with Josh Frey today. He's a Purple PTSD, the editor over there. But what I want you to do first is off air. You've told the gang that you see the team, 9 weeks from now at about a 4-8 record, which would indicate that your enthusiasm from a 10-7 record 3-4 weeks ago is dead. So I want to know, before we jump into the autopsies of positives and negatives, why have you lost faith?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy what a few turnovers will do to you. Between that goal line interception against Tampa Bay, end of the game against the Chargers, Justin Jefferson fumbling out of the end zone against Philadelphia. Like, there is a legitimate case for this team to be 3-0 right now. But it doesn't feel like the NFL gods are on the side of the Vikings this year. It seems like they've completely flipped from last year. And that just has me feeling absolutely horrible about the rest of the schedule. I do expect them to win this weekend against Carolina, but looking forward, you got the Chiefs. I'm not going to bet against Patrick Mahomes, especially since the Chiefs haven't really necessarily gotten off to the greatest start themselves. Like the Raiders are, I think, still on top. No, they're not anymore. They lost this week, so they're 1-2. But the Chiefs are like they're kind of hovering around the mid tier of the playoffs right now, and I think that they're going to come into that week 5 game just ready to beat the brakes off the Vikings. I think they go on the road and probably beat the Bears, although Bears Vikings games at Soldier Field, you never really know
Oh, yeah,
what's going
that'll
to
be the
happen in
first
those.
game. Fields looks great.
Yeah, exactly. And who knows if that's going to go. I do think the Vikings win that though. So 2-4. And then you got the 49ers. I don't think anybody's beating the 49ers if they look the way that they have through the first 3 weeks. Road against the Packers. That's I at this point, if the NFL gods aren't on the Viking side and you have to go to Lambeau, that's just not great. That's not great for me. And then Atlanta, that team's been honestly one of the biggest surprises for me this season, with Bijan Robinson looking like a star already. Desmond Ritter is not the greatest quarterback in the world, but Arthur Smith has made some really cool coaching decisions. Like it seems like that he's going for it this year in an NFC South that is really wide open at this point. So going on the road with the way that the run defense looked, especially against Philadelphia, I wouldn't be surprised if Bijan put on just an absolute show in that one. Then you got New Orleans at home. They've got Alvin Kamara coming back this week. They're also looking like a team that's going to be going for it in that NFC South, and they've looked pretty solid, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So again, run defense on top of New Orleans probably being able to shut down the Vikings offense to some sort of degree. I don't feel great about that one. And then Denver, that's a road game, which, I mean, Denver hasn't looked good at all through the first 3 weeks, but still going into Mile High and playing that game, I don't expect that one to be easy. And then home against Chicago, I think that's probably the most for sure win on this entire schedule right now. But yeah, I really don't see a great way to get back on track ahead of the bye week. And then even after the bye week, you got on the road against Las Vegas. That's going to be a tough one, even if Las Vegas isn't a great team. On the road against Cincy, 2 games against the Lions, and a home game against the Packers, who at this point look like they might be competing for a playoff spot with Jordan Love, unfortunately. So there's no gimmies on the schedule. And I just don't, with the way that things have gone through the first 3 weeks, the misexecutions in the red zone, just the silly turnovers all over the place. Unless those 2 things get fixed in a hurry, I don't see a great way forward for this team right now.
We predicated our initial predictions on the very rudimentary fact that the Vikings would be pretty good.
Yep.
And when we stared at the schedule, it didn't seem daunting to take on the Saints or the Falcons, because we thought the turnover differential or ratio would be Vikings-esque from last year, which was decent, or just not horrible, which it has been. And so you have to hope that the Vikings totally clean up the turnover problem. In reality, if they clean it up, that probably just means they're average, the middle of the pack, not being utterly moronic. And then that's not going to beat the good teams like the Chiefs, the 49ers, and the Bengals. And then you have to hope that they just get some magic in those kind of tough games at Green Bay and Atlanta. And At 0-3, it doesn't feel like a it doesn't feel smart to say, well, they're going to turn it around, because they probably would have done it by now. Hawkinson probably rips that catch to his body, tosses over the goal line, and then they're 1-2. But none of that shit is happening. It's all the goofy Caleb Evans bungles interceptions off his hands, touchdown.
The absolute worst thing about that Chargers loss is the fact that Austin Eckler didn't play a snap of that game. And they
didn't even bother running the ball.
Yeah, they didn't even try running. They didn't need to. It was like the short passing game was basically their running game, and it was wide open all day long. And the fact that one of the best running backs in the entire league isn't on the field and you still can't win that game, and the fact that it was even close at the end is, I just don't like it. I don't like this team right now. I don't like the vibe around it. Kevin O'Connell looks like he hasn't slept in 3 days. Mm-hmm. I don't love this team right now, and it just doesn't feel like this is the year.
Yeah, they I think to restore momentum or faith, they certainly have to beat the Panthers, which I haven't even decided if I'm going to pick them to beat the Panthers. I feel like putting on the clown makeup if I'm doing so. Then if they do that, let's say they do that, and then they beat the Chiefs, people will be like, all right. And then they beat the Bears at Soldier Field. If you get back to 500, then it's excusable to lose the following week to the 49ers and let the chips fall thereafter. But I mean, that's only beating the Panthers and Chiefs and the Bears. And that sounds like a vicious task, especially the guts of it with the Chiefs. And so, yeah, I think that's why we're staring at a season where if they're good, all of a sudden they're going to be chasing 500, just like the 2020 Vikings, just like the 2021 Vikings. And yeah, to your point, the ceiling of a wild card playoff spot, which will end dreadfully because all of these sins from weeks 1 through 3 will show up in the playoff game. It's automatic. All right. Well, to no further ado, let's go over I'm going to start with the negatives so we can end on a positive note with this little autopsy of 3 games. Give me one of your negatives, even though they're probably self-evident. Let's hear them.
I'm just this defensive front as a whole. Outside of Danielle Hunter and Ivan Pace here and there has just been absolutely no pass rush from this team, and that is completely inexcusable. You look at Marcus Davenport has played 4 snaps, which isn't his fault, but I mean, you went into the season knowing the caveat that he's probably going to miss a few games because of injury.
That's what you disliked about him, right? The moment it signed, you said yuck, and I was like, what?
Yeah, no, he gets hurt all the time, and when he's on the field, he's a super inconsistent player, which makes me even more nervous about this defensive front, because if he has a few of those off games, where is the other pass rush coming from? Because it hasn't come from Patrick Jones, it hasn't come from DJ Wanham. I think they've totaled like 2 QB pressures through the first 3 weeks, which is just not great. And then Dean Lowry been absolutely nothing. I don't think he's got a single tackle. He doesn't have a single QB pressure. He doesn't have a hit. He doesn't have a sack. This dude's just showing up on the field and basically being a nothing burger for you for the first 3 weeks of the season. Harrison Phillips, credit to him. He's been a decent run stopper, but I don't think we went into the season expecting him to be like that massive pass rushing presence in the middle of this defensive line. So yeah, outside of Danielle Hunter and Ivan Pace, just this entire defensive front is just no good right now.
And it's not like they're trying to get home. I think that was Alec Lewis, who we talked to a couple months ago, and Kevin Seifert tweeted that they blitzed out the absolute wazoo to try to get to Justin Herbert. It just didn't work. He didn't feel any heat. And when you bring that many dudes that frequently, you're always going to have Keenan Allen doing the thing from 8 yards away, and he turns it into 12 yards. And it's such his life. We blitzed Justin Herbert, a top 6 NFL quarterback, is 80% of the time, and nobody gave a damn. It was like they were just feasting. And so yeah, the Marcus Davenport needs to return from the ankle injury, and when he comes back, he can't be inconsistent. So you're already wishing for the hopeful maybe that he'll be healthy, and when he gets back, you hope that he's consistent. I don't know. I don't know if they can promote Andre Carter and hope he's special sauce, or Benton Whiteley, because it'll probably just be more of the same where, if Patrick Jones and DJ Wanham can't get to the quarterback, they probably already know that Carter and Whiteley won't either. And it was unforeseen to me that the Flores defense that preached pressure and blitzing was only doing the blitzing part because they can't effectuate the pressure. It's mind-boggling. What do you got for number 2 on a negative of this 0-3 start?
Just again, this debacle of the 2022 draft class. Lewis seen Andrew Booth haven't seen a single defensive snap all season, which I get is partly because Josh Metellus and Cam Bynum have been good, Caleb Evans, Mekhi Blackman have been good, but with that being the case, like why even draft those guys in the first place? Like they had those guys. Well, they didn't have Mekhi Blackman on the roster, and they drafted Caleb Evans after Andrew Booth, but they already had Cam Bynum on the roster. They had Josh Metellus around. So they kind of had some sort of sense of what was going on at the safety position, especially. So just the fact that those two guys haven't been on the field outside of special teams, and even on special teams, I think they're seeing like 40% of the snaps. So it's not like they're getting on the field a ton in those units either. And then Brian Asamoah has seen 14 defensive snaps, which the fact that it's because he's being outplayed by Ivan Pace, who has been incredible. Mm-hmm. But again, it just doesn't feel great with him, a third round pick, not being able to see the field on top of your first round pick, your second round pick. And then Ed Ingram, he's going to get benched replaced by Dalton Reisner. If it's not this week, it'll be against the Chiefs for sure. And so if you're going into the end of the season with your top 4 draft picks not seeing the field at all by the end of their second season, I'm getting very close to just calling this entire draft class just a bust at this point.
Yeah, it's getting there. And if the Vikings season continues this path of 0-3, let's say that they're 2-9 or something, they had better see what they got in Cine and Booth. Yeah. If everything's truly meaningless or Kirk's plays elsewhere, I don't think he'll be traded, but there's always that possibility if they're 1-6 by the deadline. Because we don't even know if Cine and Booth can contribute. We don't think so, because otherwise they'd be on the field. And then Asamoah, he was supposed to be the starter, but pace is too good there. And yeah, so I'm right there with you. And I haven't decided if a first-year general manager gets a generalized mulligan, because he has the old scouting staff, and it's basically his first time doing anything as a general manager. I can tell you that fans do not afford him that patience. But I mean, so far we've seen Addison do the thing, Pace does the thing, so perhaps he's getting better. But right. Weirdly, I don't know what would be worse if Cine and Booth were on the field and they were utterly horrid, or just they're not playing at all. I can't figure out what would be a more indicting scenario. Either one is pretty vicious. But yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I mean, there are the positives that the 2023 class at least looks better at this point. Jordan Addison looks like a star. Mekhi Blackman, when he's been on the field, at least it looks like he can be some sort of contributor. And then Ivan Pace has been fantastic out of the UDFA class. Andre Carter finally got on the field last weekend, which was exciting. Didn't really do much, but I mean, it's his first NFL game, so I wasn't really going into that even expecting to see him on the field. So the fact that he was there and able to contribute a little bit, that was exciting. So yeah, it looks like things are getting a little bit better. And again, maybe it's just a matter of Kwesi's first draft class. We should throw him that mulligan, like you said. And hopefully this next spring goes a little bit better. And then the 2023 class can get a little bit better next season as well. But yeah, 2022 doesn't look great. I was going to say something else, but I completely forgot. So you go ahead.
Oh, it's all good. We'll get to your final negative in a moment. There's one elixir to the memory of the 2022 draft class, and that's if Kwesi drafts the correct quarterback probably this April. If he does that, and it's somebody like Herbert or even somebody like Tua, which we strangely don't love and uplift, but he is an MVP, the top MVP candidate. Yeah. If Kwesi gets the quarterback pick right, and I'm not talking about Bridgewater leads them to the postseason, even though he throws 15 touchdowns. I'm talking about getting a guy who's good. He doesn't have to be Mahomes because there's never going to be another one, but he's got to hopefully, whoever that guy is, live in that Justin Herbert category, or at least Dak Prescott category, basically a Cousins do-over, but it's our own homegrown guy. Basically, we want somebody with Cousins stats, but we don't want Cousins. That is what fans want. If Dafa-Mensah and O'Connell nail that pick, everything to this point will be forgiven. However, if it's just kind of like a Bridgewater pick where the guy's good, but he's not great, or it's a Ponder pick, oh boy. If you think the pitchforks are bad now, wait until, it'll only take, if the fan base thinks that quarterback sucks in the first 2 or 3 games, that's how long it's going to take for them to be done. So I hope for that guy's sake, he's ready for the Vikings fan base, because they so slovenly crave to get their guy. It's been since Dante, arguably Bridgewater, before they got a guy who at least felt like a front office knew how to scout a quarterback. All right, final negative, then we'll launch into the positives.
I'm going to go with the running game just because we heard all offseason about how this was going to be a more balanced offense going into the season. And right now, it got a little bit better in week 3 against the Chargers. I still don't feel great about Alexander Mattison being a bell cow back. I wish Ty Chandler was getting a few more snaps in the backfield, because last week he had 4 touches and they went for 30 yards. So, I mean,
Funny how that works.
Yeah, I'll take that any day of the week. And it seems like he's got the kind of burst that you need, especially like a guy that's just going to spell Alexander Mattison every now and again, get a few chunk yards. So I wish that they'd utilize him a little bit more, but right now they're last in carries, they're next to last in rushing yards, and that's with a pretty decent game from Alexander Mattison in week 3. So just the fact that this running attack hasn't worked at all to this point in the season. If it had just a little bit, and they weren't they were 20th in rushing yards, I feel like this team has a chance to be 3-0 right now. So I just don't like that rushing attack right now.
Yeah, it's really, I guess, not surprising, but it's cool how the run game can really balance the play calling. I think I was sitting there in section 344, and I swear to God, they ran the ball like the first 6-7 plays, and I loved every moment of it because it was working, and it was like they got the memo. Now, of course, the drive was undone by a fumble from tight end, and you're like, well, of course that happened. Why wouldn't it? But I think that they have firmly gotten the memo. I think what happens to O'Connell in games that feel a little panicky, where they're on the ropes, I don't even think it's intentional. I think he's like, all right. And the way that his play calls go is, we don't got time to run the ball. And even if the game is still within reach, like that Eagles game, it's just a rest on your laurels quarterback thing to sling the bastard, throw the ball to your playmakers, which I love. But you have to keep the opposing defense guessing there. Or maybe they'll give it to Chandler, who has 4 touches for 30 yards. The first 2 games, it was like, nah, they ain't doing that. Who are we kidding? All right, so I'm going to guess for the guys and gals that watch their show, they tune in to hear some of the positivity, why they should even turn on the damn TV against the Panthers. So we're going to end the show in these next 8 minutes or so on positives. You can list them in any way that you want, but let's hear the first one.
I think surprisingly, I'm going to go with the offensive line for the first positive. I mean, they're top 5 in both run blocking and pass protection, according to Ben Baldwin's calculations.
Remind me, I gotta ask you a question about this as soon as you're done speaking. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, the offensive line has been really good. There are still the moments where it is dreadfully bad, like especially Ed Ingram just at times looks like he has absolutely no idea what to do on some of these plays. But overall, I feel like this offensive line has done a pretty decent job. Like if you look at any metric from PFF, ESPN, Ben Baldwin, like they're all putting them in the top 10 in terms of both pass protection and run blocking, which if you told us that before the season, we'd be like, all right, this is a Super Bowl contending team. Like it seems that they fixed the offensive line problem finally. Kirk Cousins is going to be able to do whatever he wants out of the pocket. And to an extent, that has happened, but it just hasn't resulted in any wins. So I feel like that the offensive line production has gone under the radar. Ezra Cleveland looks like an absolute stud all of a sudden, which is a very promising development. Mm-hmm. And maybe if they go 2-6 over the next 8 games or something, maybe they can get something for him at the trade deadline and then swing him into a tackle for some contending team that needs some offensive line help. But yeah, I'd like to give some flowers to the offensive line for once.
So with that said, I've seen all of the metrics you're talking about, and it blows my mind. Because it doesn't emotionally feel like they're gangbusters, is it really that Kirk Cousins is just finding his way into QB hits? Wouldn't that have to be the case? Or did they just judge the pass protection by 2.5 seconds and then shut off the tracker?
I really, especially last week against the Chargers, I feel like Kirk Cousins walked his way into a few of those QB hits. It seemed like he was really indecisive on a few of those plays. Not to take anything away from 360 yards and 3 touchdowns, because that's exactly what you want out of Kirk Cousins on a weekly basis. But just in some of those key moments where it seemed like he was, it just felt like he needed more guidance from Kevin O'Connell. And at a 35-year-old quarterback in a must-win game, you got to just go out there and take that game into your own hands and win that game, especially that last goal line drive. That the fact that they let like 17 seconds run off the clock after that play, just it's inexcusable. So yeah, I think some of these QB hits are more on Cousins than it is on the offensive line at this point.
It might also be that some of the routes, the plays, the route trees from the wide receivers take longer to develop than a lot of like the Chargers ones that we saw, which are just quick hitter bangers that are like, all right, well, we know if this is going Jefferson for 6 yards, we'll take it 2nd and 4. It doesn't seem like the Vikings embrace a lot of those. I mean, again, to your point, it works because if the fumbles weren't happening and Marcus Davenport was getting a few pressures, this might be a different story. But yeah, something's got to give because you can't have the 4th best offensive line per pass protection, according to Ben Baldwin and all these other metrics, and then get mad watching Cousins get hit all the time. There's something that we'll probably learn over the next few weeks that's not quite working out. All right, number 2 positive.
Number 2, just all these young defenders. Like we just spent a bunch of minutes talking about how Andrew Booth, Lewis Cine, and Brian Asamoah aren't getting on the field, but in part that's because Cameron Bynum's a stud. He's like the 6th best safety per PFF through the first 3 weeks of the season, which I didn't see coming at all. I thought that he was going to end up being on the bench after what we saw last year in pass coverage, but he's completely turned things around. And I think Brian Flores' scheme has a lot to do with that. Ivan Pace, we've talked about him all the time through the first 3 weeks. He's been a stud at the linebacker spot. He's doing absolutely everything that you would ask him to do in terms of pass rush, run blocking. Still think he could get a little bit better in pass coverage, but at this point, like I'll take 2 out of the 3. 2 out of the 3 ain't bad right now. And then Caleb Evans at corner, he's suitable, and that's all that we could really ask for at this point at that second cornerback spot.
I think to your point on the defense, so everything else that looks promising sans the other outside linebacker spot. If the Vikings, for some reason, do not draft a quarterback, and let's say they go with Cousins again, or they trade for Kyler Murray, if the Cardinals are getting into the Williams sweepstakes for sure, I think an edge rusher automatically has to be whatever that first pick is, whether it's round 1, pick 5, round 1, pick 20. They don't have one at all because they traded it to the Cardinals for Kyler Murray. I think that the first pick of the event finally has to be an edge rusher because it's time. They haven't drafted one in the rounds 1 or 2 since 2005, and I think they're paying the piper. We got away with it for a very long time. But the rest of the defense that you've talked about is promising, and it's part of the reason why we don't even bother seeing Cine or Booth, especially Ivan Pace. I think Blackman will get better. Evans is a hero if he snags that interception, but he didn't. So I think there is growth. And then the other byproduct of this is that if this defense continues its same path, there's a very decent chance Brian Flores will be back for year 2, and he won't be this giant hot commodity to go get a head coaching job, which I think is a good thing. We'll see how the remaining 14 games play out. All right, your final nugget of optimism to get us ready 4 days from now, Panthers-Vikings.
This one doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the Panthers.
Oh, okay.
It is just the fact that the Texans and the Cardinals won last week, and the Vikings are behind them in the standings right now, and they're leading the way for the Caleb Williams sweepstakes. If that happens, if they land Caleb Williams, I feel like that would be just the absolute perfect scenario for the Vikings going into the next season. But I don't think that they're going to land Caleb Williams, but just keeping an eye on some of these top draft picks right now, I do think that they're going to go get a quarterback next spring, especially if they don't have a winning season and they end up with a top 15 pick or something. There are so many quarterbacks in this upcoming draft class that look like they're going to be really good. I love Dylan Gabriel out of Oklahoma. I think he looks like a really great player, kind of the southpaw version of a Kyler Murray, as what I would describe him as. But yeah, just I'm getting very close to just turning off all expectations for the season and looking ahead to the draft. So I just wanted to give some input on that.
No, your input is valued. I'm watching Tank Dell tear it up, and that's the guy you told me the Vikings need to get him. And I'm like, God, that's what Josh said. I mean, not that the Vikings really need him right now, but the fact that he was going to be good, you saw. Well, I was going to say 8 months ago, but you probably saw it 18 months ago. Let me ask you as we get off air. So now you know breadcrumbs about the Vikings and the NFL season, 3 weeks of it. You've seen 4 weeks of college football. You're an elite draft mind. How many good quarterbacks are we talking that we could, give them the baton and say, you're the quarterback of the future? I know that there's still a lot of season to go in college, but Are we talking like 7 or 8? Or are we talking like 4?
I think there's at least 6 quarterbacks going on in the first round next year.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, like even if the Vikings manage to turn things around and get a wild card spot and they're sitting like 21, I think there's a quarterback that they can go get with that pick.
That's super
And
encouraging.
yeah, and I mean, at the very least, like if quarterbacks all go in the top 10 or something, that means that skill players are going to be for the taking in the middle of the first round of the next year's draft. So I do think that there's going to be a lot of QB talent. Caleb Williams, Drake May, probably the top right now. Michael Penix out of Washington looks like an absolute stud right now too. Cam Risner out of Cam Ward, Washington State. I think he looks like a stud right now too. There's a lot of talent. Dylan Gabriel. So there's going to be QBs that are available in the first round next year.
That is such a promising outlook or projection, because no matter where they pick, I'd like to know that, all right, well, they're going to have so-and-so like Shedeur Sanders if he actually ends up coming out.
Sanders, yeah.
All right, my man, we'll talk to you in 1 week. Who knows what state of the Vikings we're talking about then, but we will for sure, no matter what. You have a wonderful week, all right?
You too, man. See you then.
All right, later.